Did you start this week with actual faith? Like, real, honest to God, I'm gonna trust Him this time faith? And now it's Wednesday, just Wednesday, not even Friday yet, and you're already staring at the ceiling at 5:47 in the morning, whispering into the dark, God, how much longer? When are you actually going to show up? Because Monday came in hot with that rejection email you didn't see coming. Tuesday, the school called about your kid again. And this morning, before your feet even hit the floor, you opened another hospital bill for your aging mother, and something inside you just cracked. Not a dramatic, movie scene breakdown. Just a quiet, exhausted fracture somewhere deep in your chest where hope used to live. And here's the thing nobody tells you in church, it's rarely the big tragedies that unravel your faith. It's the grinding. The daily erosion. The slow, steady drip of pressure that wears down your trust in a God who's supposed to be moving mountains but feels completely silent while you're drowning in paperwork and phone calls and the relentless hum of what if this never changes. I know this place. Not as a pastor with a perfect smile and a sermon outline. I know it as someone who sat in a parking lot after a 10-hour shift, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white, tears cutting tracks through the day's exhaustion, and I said out loud, barely above a breath, do you even hear me anymore? Or am I just talking to the ceiling? And maybe that's where you are right now. Not in a sanctuary with stained glass and organ music. Maybe you're in your car. In your kitchen with cold coffee from 2 hours ago. In the bathroom with the fan running so nobody hears you fall apart. And the prayers you've been praying feel like they're bouncing off the walls and landing nowhere. Here's what I need you to hear before you decide to check out completely this morning. Jesus looked at his disciples in Mark chapter 11, and he didn't give them a soft suggestion. He didn't hand out a gentle recommendation. He looked at them exhausted, confused, probably wondering if they'd signed up for something they didn't understand, and he said, have faith in God. Not if you can muster it. Not once you feel ready. Not after you've cleaned yourself up and figured out all your doubts. Have faith. It's a command. But it's also an invitation wrapped in desperation, extended to people who have nothing left but the thinnest thread of belief. And here's the part that wrecked me when I finally understood it. You don't need perfect faith. You don't need mountain-moving, giant-slaying, never-wavering faith. You just need enough faith to whisper what a desperate father once said to Jesus, I believe. Help my unbelief. That's it. That's the whole thing. Not a declaration of victory. Not a polished testimony. Just raw, trembling honesty before a God who can handle your doubt better than you can handle your own pretending. So this morning, before you decide that God has forgotten your address, before you let the exhaustion convince you that his silence is rejection, there's something he wants you to hear. Something that might feel like a thread in the darkness, but it's enough to hold on to until the light breaks through. Because here's what I'm learning, slowly and painfully and with more stumbles than I can count, God isn't intimidated by your disillusionment. He's not threatened by your questions. He's not pacing heaven, wringing his hands because you're struggling to trust him today. If anything, he's nearer in this moment than he's ever been, closer than your next breath, closer than the doubt, closer than the fear that's been whispering you're on your own. You're not on your own. I know it doesn't feel like it. I know the circumstances are screaming a different story. I know the evidence seems stacked against everything you once believed. But before you walk away from this moment and dive back into the chaos of your week, there's a truth pressing against the edges of your exhaustion, waiting for you to notice it. And it's this: the God who commanded you to have faith is the same God who holds the universe together with a word. He's not asking you to manufacture something you don't have. He's inviting you to reach for him with whatever you've got left, even if it's just a shaky hand in the dark. So don't close the door yet. Don't shut down your heart just because the answers haven't come on your timeline. Because what he's about to do in the middle of your Wednesday might not look like a miracle. It might look like a memory. A whisper. A shift so small you'd miss it if you weren't paying attention. But it's enough. It's always been enough. And he's not finished speaking yet. Maybe you're standing in front of a mountain right now that God hasn't moved. Not because he can't. Not because he's busy with someone else's crisis. But because he wants you to learn how to climb it with him. Let me tell you about a man I know. 53 years old. 22 years at the same company. Showed up early, stayed late, never called in sick unless he was basically dying. And then one Tuesday afternoon, they handed him a piece of paper and a cardboard box and told him his position had been eliminated. 22 years. Reduced to a signature on a severance agreement. He didn't go home right away. He sat in his garage for 3 hours, still holding that letter, staring at the wall where his tools hung. And in the silence between the ticking of the car engine cooling down and the hum of the refrigerator in the corner, he whispered something he'd never said out loud before. God, where are you? This was raw. Guttural. God didn't answer him in that garage. Just silence. 3 months passed. 3 months of his wife telling him it would be okay while she was secretly fighting her own battle, a cancer diagnosis she hadn't told many people about because she didn't want to add to his burden. And then the door opened. The job that finally came through wasn't the promotion he deserved or the position that matched his experience. It was smaller. Quieter. Less impressive on LinkedIn. It gave him the one thing his old job never could: time. Time to drive his wife to chemotherapy. Time to sit in waiting rooms holding her hand. Time to be present for the battle they never saw coming. You see, God wasn't silent in that garage because he was absent. He was silent because he was already working on a plan that was too big for that man to understand in the moment. The closed door wasn't rejection. It was protection. The delay wasn't punishment. It was preparation. And the silence wasn't abandonment. It was the sound of God rearranging circumstances 3 months down the road to catch him when he fell. So let me ask you something, and I want you to sit with this honestly. What mountain are you staring at right now? Not some abstract spiritual mountain. I'm talking about the real one. The one made of deadlines piling up on your desk like a monument to your anxiety. The one shaped like a marriage that's been held together with duct tape and forced smiles for longer than you want to admit. The one that looks like your teenager's bedroom door, slammed shut, with you on the outside wondering where you went wrong. The one that whispers your failures back to you at 2 a.m. when the house is too quiet and your thoughts are too loud. Maybe your mountain is the fear that you're not enough. Not a good enough parent. Not a good enough spouse. Not a good enough Christian. Maybe it's the exhaustion of pretending you have it all together when inside you're barely holding on by a thread that's fraying faster than you can tie knots. Here's what I'm learning, and I'm going to be real with you because I don't have time for fake Christianity and neither do you. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6 says this: "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding." Now, I've heard that verse 1,000 times. Maybe you have too. But I want you to notice one word that I missed for years. All. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Not the cleaned up, presentable parts. Not the Sunday morning version of you that has the right answers and sings the right songs. All of it. The broken pieces. The doubting pieces. The disappointed pieces. The parts of your heart that are still angry at God for not showing up the way you thought He would. You don't get to compartmentalize this. You don't get to give God the pretty parts and hold back the messy ones. He wants the whole thing, the trust and the distrust, the faith and the fear, the belief and the unbelief all tangled up together. Because here's the life lesson that's going to either set you free or make you mad, depending on where you are right now. Faith isn't about understanding the plan. It's about trusting that there is a plan even when you don't understand a single thing that's happening. I remember standing at my father's grave. It was one of those gray afternoons where the sky couldn't decide if it wanted to rain or just threaten it. I was holding a small wooden cross in my hand, the kind you can buy at any religious bookstore, and I was squeezing it so hard the edges were digging into my palm. I wasn't praying. I wasn't feeling spiritual. I was just standing there, hollowed out by grief, trying to remember how to breathe. And my mother, who had just lost the man she'd loved for over 40 years, walked up beside me. She didn't give me a sermon. She didn't quote scripture. She just put her hand on my back and said something I'll never forget. God never promised you would understand. But He promised you would never walk alone. That was my turning point. Not in a flashy, lightning from heaven kind of way, but in a quiet, tectonic shift deep beneath the surface that didn't even register until much later. Because in that moment, I realized I'd been measuring God's presence by my understanding. If I could figure it out, He must be near. If I couldn't, He must have left. But that's not how any of this works. What if the silence of God isn't rejection but protection? What if the closed door on Monday wasn't a punishment but a rescue from a mistake you couldn't see yet? What if the delay you're so frustrated about isn't neglect but preparation for something you're not ready to receive? I'm asking you to shift your perspective right now, even if it feels like a stretch. Even if your circumstances are screaming the opposite. Because the truth that changes everything is this: God's silence is not His absence. It's often His most active work happening behind the scenes, in the places you can't see, through the people you haven't met yet, in the timing you would never choose but desperately need. So here's the prophetic act I'm inviting you into right now. And I need you to hear me clearly: this isn't some magic formula. This isn't a prosperity promise. This isn't me telling you that. But this is a declaration of faith in the middle of the pressure. This is you putting a stake in the ground when everything in you wants to retreat. This is you saying, I don't see the way, I don't feel the favor, I don't understand the delay, but I'm choosing to believe that God is still working anyway. So right now, Toi nan on hu qua chua va toi tin nice mo duong ham ne. Type it. Declare it. Mean it. Because when you write those words, you're not denying the pain. You're not pretending the pressure doesn't exist. You're not ignoring the mountain that's still standing in front of you. You're saying, I hurt, but I'm still believing. I'm confused, but I'm still trusting. I'm exhausted, but I'm still standing. And the God who parted the Red Sea, the God who made a way through the wilderness, the God who turned Friday's crucifixion into Sunday's resurrection, that same God is still the author of my story. But I've learned that surrender isn't quitting. Surrender isn't weakness. Surrender is finally admitting that you were never meant to carry the weight of the universe on your shoulders in the first place. I remember the night I finally got it. And it wasn't in a church service. It wasn't during a worship song. It wasn't when someone laid hands on me and prayed some powerful, prophetic prayer. It was in my kitchen at 11 o'clock at night, and I was washing dishes. The house was quiet. Everyone else was asleep. And I was standing at the sink with my hands in the soapy water, and I just started crying. I had been trying so hard to hold it all together. Trying to figure out every solution. Trying to control every outcome. Trying to manage every relationship, every responsibility, every fear, every what if. And I was exhausted. I was absolutely, completely, soul-deep exhausted. And standing there with dish soap up to my elbows, I finally whispered, God, I can't do this anymore. I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to make it work. I don't even know what to pray anymore. I'm done trying to be you. And in that moment, in that kitchen, at that sink, at 11 o'clock at night, something shifted. Not in my circumstances. Nothing changed externally. The problems were still there. The pressure was still real. The mountain hadn't moved an inch. But something broke open inside me. I realized that surrender isn't failure. Surrender is finally letting God fight the battle you were never supposed to fight alone. I had been confusing surrender with defeat. But God whispered to my heart that night, you don't surrender to lose. You surrender to win. You surrender so that I can step in. You surrender because my strength is made perfect in your weakness. You surrender because I never asked you to be the savior, that's my job. And I wonder if someone needs to hear that right now. You've been trying to control everything because you're afraid that if you let go, it'll all fall apart. But what if the opposite is true? What if the thing that's falling apart is your own strength? What if God is waiting for you to stop gripping so tightly so He can actually move? Psalm 90 verse 17 says this. And I want you to really hear these words because they're going to reframe something for you. May the favor of the Lord our God rest on us, establish the work of our hands for us, yes, establish the work of our hands. Now look at that word. Establish. In the Hebrew, that word means to make firm, to set up, to make stable, to secure. It's the same word used when Scripture talks about God establishing His throne, God establishing His covenant, God establishing something that cannot be shaken. So when the psalmist prays, Lord, establish the work of our hands, he's not just asking God to bless the project. He's not just asking for a little divine favor sprinkled on top of his effort like sugar on a donut. He's asking God to make the work itself stand firm, to secure it against the storm, to build it in such a way that when the winds come and the waves crash and the pressure mounts, the work doesn't collapse. Because here's the Bible truth that changes everything. God's favor isn't just about the door opening. It's about the strength to walk through that door once it opens. It's about the stability to stand once you get inside. It's about the endurance to keep going when the honeymoon phase wears off and the real work begins. You've been asking God to open a door. And He will. But what if He's also establishing your hands so that when you walk through that door, you don't crumble under the weight of what's on the other side? What if the preparation you're in right now isn't punishment? What if it's establishment? What if He's fortifying your faith, deepening your character, strengthening your foundation so that the blessing doesn't destroy you when it finally arrives? Some of you have been praying for favor, but you didn't realize that favor includes the fortification. Favor includes the preparation. Favor includes the season where God works in you before He works through you. And that's exactly what He's doing right now. In the silence. In the waiting. In the Wednesday morning that feels just as hard as Monday and Tuesday did. So let me pray for you. And I'm not going to shift into some perfect, polished pastor voice because that's not who I am and that's not what you need right now. I'm just a brother who's been broken too. I'm just someone who stood at the kitchen sink at 11 o'clock at night and cried because I couldn't carry it anymore. And I'm going to talk to God the way I talk to Him when nobody's listening and there's no camera and there's no audience. Father, I come to you right now not with eloquence, not with religious formality, but with the raw honesty of a heart that knows what it feels like to be exhausted. And I lift up the person who's watching this right now,